using web scraping and comparing the results of web scraping with sometimes official results when you add both these kind of statistics. So Daniela, Behr and her team have been working on this, and I had the pleasure to discuss this nice work. So I think it's a very interesting work because there are still very few data on emerging and developing economies. So I think it will give some very interesting insights. So I now give you the floor, Daniela, you have 20 minutes, and of course we can keep a few minutes then for questions and discussion. The floor is yours.
Great, excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the really nice introduction. I'm very excited to be here and to present today a paper on house prices in emerging markets and developing economies. So this work is joint work with my co-authors who are at the IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank, Sandeep, Singh, Khondoker, Haider, and Asad, Zaman, as well as Lixue, Chen, and Ankita, Goel, who are now at IMF. And this paper is part of a larger research project at IFC on affordable housing. And to the best of our knowledge, this is one of the first papers that is estimating house prices in emerging markets and developing economies. And as we've heard in the keynote speech, this is really where data is not yet readily available. And you can find the QR code to the full paper here in the right-hand corner of the slides. So let me get started. Today, I will provide you a brief overview on the overall research and will also situate this paper within the context of estimating house prices. And then I will provide a very quick overview on literature and existing approaches to collect and estimate house prices and why this is a unique issue in emerging markets and developing economies. I will then outline the web scraping approach we undertook for the emerging markets and describe the data processing in greater detail. And lastly, I will outline two key metrics that we're estimating both from the overall distribution of the data as well as through random forest estimation, the median house price and what we denote as the basic house price. So as mentioned, this paper is part of a larger research project here at IFC on affordable housing and measuring housing affordability across a large number of emerging markets and developing economies. And we are set out to measure housing affordability in over 60 markets. And we therefore need like three key data sources. First, household incomes, which we obtain from household surveys and living standard measurement surveys that are conducted with support of the World Bank. Second, we need housing conditions, like the condition of the roof, the floor, and such, which we also obtain from these household surveys and living standard measurement surveys. We also need housing finance offerings such as interest rates, LTV, and tenor to understand the availability of mortgages for these 60 economies. And these data we obtain from central banks, commercial banks, and also in investments that IFC is doing in housing finance projects. And lastly, obviously, in order to assess housing affordability, we need house price data. And we really struggle to find comparable data for many economies that we cover, and therefore decided to collect these data through a web scraping approach. Here on this slide, you see the economies that we cover in the overall study. As I said, 60 economies. If you exclude China, representing about 88% of the population in emerging markets. And in this paper that I'm going to present out to you today, we lay out an approach for obtaining house price data for 5 emerging economies: Albania, Costa Rica, Morocco, Pakistan, and South Africa. And this will be the center of today's discussion. But again, these data are also available for all other 60 economies as well, where data is really notoriously scarce and particularly scarce on house prices. So recent efforts to collect house price data obviously exist, and I'm just going to list here a few of those. The Bank of International Settlement collects house price data covering a relatively large number of countries, but they're mostly focusing on advanced economies. And property prices are harmonized as much as possible by the BIS according to recommendations outlined in the Handbook of Residential Property Prices. But again, the focus is mostly on advanced economies. Second, we have the International Comparison Program, ICP, which collects price for a range of goods and services that make up final consumption and expenditure and gross capital formation. And they also capture housing expenditures. But here it's mostly on rental prices and dwelling stock data. And rents are either captured as actual or imputed rents, but nothing on house price data in terms of sales. Then the OECD publishes nominal residential property price indices. And we also see a lot of efforts undertaken by the IMF or Federal Reserve banks here in the United States. And we have the Center for Affordable Housing in Sub-Saharan Africa, CAF, which is quite unique in its efforts as it systematically collects house price data for African countries specifically by surveying local housing experts on the cost and the size of houses, but they're mostly concerned with the cheapest house being built by a private developer. And at country level, we have tax authorities, land registries, or real estate associations that collect data. But so far, it's really difficult to transpose this into less advanced economies and to have it available again on a comparative level. And recently, there are also crowd-sourced platforms such as Numbeo, which are user-inserted inputs on property prices in various locations around the world. And they have also added their own house price index along with publicly available per square foot price ranges on property for within the city and outside the city. And as Jean-Charles has said in his introduction, like a similar approach has been undertaken for the HouseLev database, where also mostly emerging markets are in the minority of the countries covered. So this is really the first effort that is trying to collect house prices for a large number of emerging markets and developing economies, where these house price data are virtually non-existent. And if available at all, residential property prices are mostly presented and published in an indexed format, allowing to track changes over time. However, these indices are not really informative to the understanding of more distributional aspects of prices, affordability issues, and the degree of price segments that are currently underserved in a specific market. Comprehensive house price data are really scarce, as I said, and therefore also web scraping of house price data for in emerging markets is non-existent. There are some exceptions. For instance, in 2018, Gnanagi and Tans, who collected data for 64,000 properties in Indonesia through a web scraping approach. And as I mentioned, the HouseLev database project that assembled house prices for over 40 countries, mainly focused on European and advanced economies, including some economies from the emerging markets such as Turkey or the Russian Federation. To bridge this data gap, we are following a big data approach where we scrap data from the largest real estate website where private properties are listed for sale to obtain price data and property attributes such as square meter, how many rooms, the location, etc., to really assemble a comprehensive data set across countries. And the goal is to use the entire breadth and width of the market to generate key measures on house price and supply that reflect the formal housing market that are comparable across markets through a single metric that reflect country inherent characteristic unique to the housing market. And most of the underlying data to existing house price indices are very country and context specific, and they fit the purpose for monitoring price changes over time within a specific country, but do not facilitate cross-country comparison, which we are really concerned with. And that is why we propose 2 key metrics that are drawn from the data that are comparable across countries, which is the median house price that we take from the distribution and the basic house price, which we estimate through a random forest estimation. So in terms of data web scraping, we identify the most up-to-date and complete website that lists private property prices across the 60 emerging markets. And overall, websites were selected based on the comprehensiveness of the number of listings that are up to date, the broad range of properties listed. So we try to avoid websites that are purely targeting expats, for instance, or only the higher, more luxurious listings. Also, we were looking for structured data entries on housing attributes that help us estimate the house prices, such as, again, number of rooms, square meter, location, etc. We limit ourselves to up to 3 websites since we noticed considerable cross-postings in these websites, and then we scrape all residential properties that are available at one point in time, along with all these housing features, whether the property is an apartment or a house, the size, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and sometimes amenities such as a garage or the time of construction, etc. And as a first effort to scrape private property prices in several emerging markets, we faced unique challenges compared to similar efforts in more developed markets, such as issues pertaining to the number of observations available per website, the organization and reliability of the data, and the measurements units provided. So if you think about the US with its very structured Zillow-type websites, this is not what we found in countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Bangladesh, or others. And I will go into this in more detail. So the paper that is that I'm presenting today, again, presents this data approach for these 5 countries, Albania, Costa Rica, Morocco, Pakistan, and South Africa, as an example of how this approach can be done in emerging markets. But again, we did this for 60 economies. And here's just an example of how the websites usually looked like that we dealt with. So on the right-hand side, you see for Tanzania, apartments listed for sale, where more information is then provided once you click into each particular website, where then in the description, you have some more information about the apartment available, in addition to the structured price, rooms, and area available. And on the left-hand side, you see some information where it's far less structured, where the description is in a language that we're not able to identify very quickly. And the information is also very scattered across. So these were some of the issues that we faced across these 16 markets. So just very briefly, I don't think I need to delve into this in more detail in this group. The advantages of web scraping are ubiquitous. It's very cost effective. We're able to get high frequency data, and we're also able to capture the distributional aspect of the data. But of course, there are also disadvantages, and I briefly want to mention them here, that we're only capable of scraping the listed price as opposed to the transaction price, and there may be a sizable difference in those. And also, and this is particularly relevant for the emerging markets, we're only able to get to the formally built houses, and there is often a bias towards higher listed properties. And we're not able to capture this very large portion of property that is being self-built and that is not transacted in the formal market. And also across countries, we see quite a lot of variability in terms of data quality and also reliability in data that we have to deal with once we get to the estimation. And particularly challenging for emerging markets is the fact that websites, particularly those that do not have a regional coverage, but that are just available for a single country, have limited formal standards in terms of data entry. And many websites in emerging markets do not have consistency in data in terms of property characteristics, or provide like a very limited like information, like it's the price and then a phone number that you'll see that you can call to like inquire more about the property. Often there are also some pictures available on the property, and that's about it. Sometimes the websites does not provide the option to insert size information at all, which is obviously very important for us for the estimation of property prices. And then it's up to the user to insert the number in a correct format. And obviously there are quite a number of different units that users use. So it's like the difference between square feet and square meters is sometimes challenging to discern if the platform doesn't specify what unit is needed to be inserted. And obviously this becomes more cumbersome once we move towards regions where there's multiple versions of units that can be provided, such as in South Asian websites, Nepal and Pakistan, where you have unit sizes between kata, duri, rupani, and all of those alongside square feet and square meters, which requires a lot of data cleaning at the back end to understand the actual sizes in square meter or square feet. Just in terms of data processing, we did quite a lot of work in order to clean out and overcome these issues that I just mentioned. And in order to provide like the way we process the data, we came up with 4 different data sets to show how these like how many numbers of observations we dropped, etc. So we have the original data set as we scraped. We identify and remove duplicates and data entry errors where rental listings or commercial listings are still in the data, or where we simply have agricultural land that wasn't marked as such. And we also then create a truncated data set applying several data filters. We assume, for instance, that observations below 9 square meters and above 3,000 square meters are either data entry errors or properties that cannot be considered residential properties, such as like farmland or storing units. And we assume that properties of less than 9 square meters are not habitable for one person, aligning with the definition of UN habitat on a livable property. And this way, we take care of various typical features in emerging markets and developing economies where entire apartment complexes are sold in bulk as an investment project. And there, the major issue is that we have a really big mismatch between the size of each individual apartment within that apartment complex and the price data. After that, we create what we call the right-censored data set, which sets a maximum price for the observations and a maximum size. And this is to remove luxurious residential properties that are not targeted at the local housing market. Finally, we also undertake multivariate outlier removal to get towards the final data set. And this is just an example of how this would look like for Pakistan. For the entire estimations on the median house price and the basic house price, we only we only make use of the final data set, which drops quite a number of, again, data entry errors and duplicates. But this is to move forward with like the best data available for estimating the house price across countries. So now let me move to some descriptive statistics on the data that we have for the 5 countries presented here in this paper. We observed quite different patterns in terms of availability of apartments versus single-family homes. While in Costa Rica, South Africa, and Pakistan depicted here on the slides, the number of apartments and houses are quite well distributed. In Albania and Morocco, there are much more apartments than houses available within the data. And in South Africa and Costa Rica, the right-hand side of the distribution is also dominated by rather expensive single-family houses and only a few expensive apartments. And similar patterns are observable in the price-size relationship. In Pakistan, while we observed the price and size differences between houses and apartments being rather marginal, in South Africa and to a lower extent also in Costa Rica, we have noticeable price differences between houses and apartments, which could be potentially also attributed to the composition effect, as houses and apartments are not equally located in all places. And the strength of the observed correlation between house price and size also varies quite significantly across countries. And in South Africa, as you can see, this correlation really is weakest, where among apartment and houses and also overall. And this suggests that size may not be the primary driver of prices here, and that other attributes collected, such as, for instance, location, have much more explanatory power. And equally insightful are frequency distributions, which are not depicted here on the slides, where across countries, units smaller than 200 square meters are usually apartments. And in Costa Rica and Pakistan, there are a significant number of smaller sized houses compared to those in other emerging markets in our sample. And this is quite consistent also with literature that we found, where in Pakistan, the preferred house is a 5 marla house, which is equal to about 126 square meters. So based on the data that we obtained from our web scraping, we assessed the median house price, which I show here in our slides. This is again from the distribution, no estimation done so far from the final data set. And to segment the housing market and to provide country-specific definitions of affordable housing and affordable segment, we use the two price data points that I mentioned in the beginning, the median house price and the price of a typical house as well. And these two concepts really help standardizing the house price vis-a-vis what is available across markets, and also present the upper and the lower echelons of what we define as the affordable segment. So now let me briefly get to our estimation and the estimation of the basic house price. Advanced price estimation techniques have evolved with the increased usage of big data approaches to collecting property prices from listing websites. And while traditionally the hedonic price model served as a prerequisite for estimating house prices, random forest really kind of became the standard of estimating house prices, applying a decision tree technique towards house prices as well. And this is what we apply in our model as well. We use whatever is available in terms of attributes such as characteristics of the property, including size, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, as well as location, and the type, as I showed in the previous slides, whether it's an apartment or a house. Now, let me briefly move to why we decided to go with the concept of a basic house price. We standardized this price as a formally supplied 50 square meters, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment located in an urban area within a given economy, which is assumed to have basic municipal or on-site services such as water, sanitation, road access, and an energy source. So why do we estimate this basic house price? We aim to provide a data point on price that is independent of the distribution and of the type and quality of the houses, which vary significantly across markets. And this can be used as an metric to monitor the inclusiveness of a housing market, and it offers a standard measure to assess and compare housing affordability across the population once you pair it with the income data that we obtained from the household income surveys as well. So just very briefly, in terms of parameter optimization, we fixed the number of subtrees in the estimation on the random forest. And we also see that the out-of-bag error rate converges after the number of iteration gets large enough. So we ran this for the 5 countries in our paper, and then just decided to go with 500 iterations of the estimation across all 60 economies for simplicity purposes. And to check for the robustness of the assumptions for our data, we iteratively run the model for 2 countries, testing incrementally by increasing from like 10 to 500 iteration to see how this changes the estimations. And we also select a number of variables to randomly investigate at each split, like the depth of the decision trees. And just to show in terms of the depth of the decision trees, the property price estimation in developed markets often have really many property attributes to choose from: square meters, bedroom, bathroom, garage, distance to markets, etc. However, in our case, this was not really able to do. So here you see like the different variables used in the random forest model across the 5 countries measured. And now I just want to present you with some of the results of the basic house price across the countries in our data. So Albania, in terms of US dollars, 71,000 US dollars for this basic house, which we denote as 50 square meter. In Morocco, slightly cheaper at $53,000. Colombia, 55. South Africa, slightly more expensive at 63. And you also see, this is now from the sample of 60 countries, the differences across regions for Middle East, Europe and Central Asia, East Asia and Pacific, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, with unsurprisingly Sub-Saharan African properties being the cheapest. At 42,000 US dollars. We also, in order to facilitate cross-country comparison, provide the PPP price, where you now see like an equalization across the countries in terms of purchasing power. Now, just in terms of next steps, by way of demonstrating the methodology and data processing for these 5 emerging markets, we show that web scraping offers a cost-effective way to obtain a large amount of price data for countries where official data is absent or where alternate sources on prices are simply not available. And the main constraint in this approach remains the unorganized structure of listing websites and also the limited number of information on features and property attributes available. And the good side of all of this is that we are very confident that this approach will only improve over time as the capabilities of listing websites improve and as they become the more preferred method of listing property in emerging markets as well. And finally, also the software can extract information that is not supplied systematically in listing websites and could improve model precision. And in addition, addresses could be like, for instance, geotagged to incorporate crucial details about location that we're not able to capture from what is currently imputed in the description of the websites, to differentiate also within city variation, which at this point we're not yet capable of doing. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present this paper in this amazing panel today. I'm very much looking forward to engaging with you and to hearing your thoughts and questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Daniela, for this very rich paper, as I already had the occasion to tell you, and for keeping the time. There is a question in the chat. Can you please share which feature selection technique has been used in the paper for selecting features?
Yes, this is an excellent question. So as I mentioned before, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of selecting from like different like arrays of available property and then using the one that is like most consistent across all countries. For the random forest estimation technique across the 60 countries, we used a minimum number of attributes available across countries, which was usually size, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and whether it's an apartment or a house. So there was not much advanced selection technique possible for us because, again, like the number of features available was very minimal.
On my side, I already asked the question, but not with the same audience. We have a nice snapshot of the situation in the emerging countries, but of course, it can slightly evolve over time, especially in the current times with interest rates growing and the mortgage credit diminishing. Do you plan, or somebody else outside World Bank plans to update on the regular basis this database? Because of course it will also be interesting to have the dynamic aspect of these prices.
Excellent question. So as of now, as I mentioned, it's a one point in time estimation. So we're not able to track progress over time, which especially now would be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
So prospectively, if we have the resources to do this type of work, it's something that we aspire to. But for now, it's not yet planned, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I also see an additional question in the chat about alternative measures to random forest. So we also assessed like the simple hedonic price model as well, and like a simple regression model to see the differences. And we found that out of like the predictions out of sample were more precise for the random forest. So going forward to like maximize the comparability across countries, we applied random forest consistently across the 60 economies.
I find it super interesting. So typically, do you have the addresses? Or if not the full address, at least some information, some spatial information. I mean, I think there was something about urban or not, something like that. But I don't know, can you talk a little bit about that? And then I would also be interested in, is this data going to be open, or what do you plan on with this data?
Yes, wonderful. Two excellent question. So if included into the random forest model, like we do have information on the city, which we cleaned like in terms of spelling and all of that to make sure it's the same city available. For like countries such as India, where the websites are more structured, we also have for subsample addresses available, but we haven't made the effort of geotagging them to, like provide a more nuanced and granular overview on the data. So that is yet to be done. It's also an aspiration of to-dos for us. And to your second question, yes, these data will be publicly available once like this final paper that we're trying to publish on the 60 economies is public. We are like aspiring to have a dashboard that includes the information that I showed on the median price, the basic house price as well, and all other information that may not be relevant as much for you, but like in terms of household income to estimate affordability issues across the 60 economies. So it will be available on the IFC website, and then hopefully also cross-linked on other websites such as this one here.